do predict that we are going to long for the time of connection. I think we're going to long for print books. I think we're going to want to touch and feel things even as we use technology.
So I think that's an interesting segue. I think there are a lot of interesting things we'll see that happen 10 years from now. But talking about the social impact and such, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both. I think that people are going to still have preferences. Some people will prefer physical books more often than digital. Some people will prefer digital books. I think it'll depend on, are you doing pleasurable reading at home, or are you a road warrior and you simply can't carry around 25 books with you because you can't. I think that people will continue to communicate socially. I think it in some ways will make improvements to when people do interact in person, they will value it more and it will be richer because of that. But I think the free flow of information enables other things that we didn't have previously when you could only physically meet in person before we had telephones or anything else. So I think there's an interesting balance to be met between those things.
Good run of topics. So let me invite our other panelists to kind of talk, and I'm going to ask you two guys to lead off on a subject that kind of we touched on. So I'm going to wander around the questions here. Security and privacy. All right, so preference, security, privacy. Which is going to win in the way that we run out the Internet of Things, right? Preference says security and privacy be damned. We're just going to go do it, right? Security and privacy says, no, we're going to do this in an orderly way. So which one of you wants the mic first? So I'd love to have your thoughts on that, and then we'll invite the others to comment in.
All right. So if I may, I actually just wanted to continue the prior conversation, and I'll get into the security and privacy. A little Toastmaster trick that I learned. So one of the things that's very interesting is when we think about 10 years out, and we think about this decentralized environment where you have mesh network, right? Wireless sensor network. And what becomes very important is coordination and communication within that environment. And what's really interesting is that in that environment where it's a many-to-many relationship and you have very complex topology in terms of networks, how do you start to actually communicate in a way that makes sense for us as humans? Because if there's 100 million nodes, do you want to really communicate with each and every one of those nodes? It doesn't make sense. So one of the things that's going to be very interesting, and I think IBM's going to be one of the key drivers of this notion, is the notion of ambient virtual assistant. So let me just elaborate a little bit more in terms of what I mean by that. It means that all of us will eventually have our personalized virtual assistants. That is going to be the intermediary between us and everything else, because we frankly don't want to listen to the refrigerator or the pencil sharpener or the car every single time. So somebody's going to negotiate. Now, what we're seeing from a today environment is that we're seeing very narrow use cases where AI-based intelligence is helping us with email scheduling, X.AI as an example. It's helping us with hotel concierge, visual search as an example. But what we're going to start to move towards is a holistic virtual assistant. And for those who have maybe a little bit lack of imagination, think about Iron Man as an example. But these AI agents isn't going to be device specific per se, but the word that I use intentionally is ambient, because it's going to reside everywhere, but it's for you and for you only. So anyways, so my AI agent called Alfred is going to be able to help me schedule a grooming for my pet. It's going to wash my car, and it's going to plan out my dinner, and it's going to actually monitor my manufacturing plant. All right, so let's go on to the second question around privacy and security. They are symbiotic, but yet they're different. And I don't know how many privacy and security panels I've sat on over the last couple of years. But one of the things, and I'll defer the question to the rest of the panelists, but the areas that I'm more interested in talking about is a little bit of the how-to. So one of the things we're seeing, if you're familiar with OwnCloud, which is an open source file sharing sync type of a platform, is that we're starting to see this movement towards private cloud, but more importantly, movement to private data vault. So we've seen DigiMe, we've seen Personal Black Box, we've seen Internet of Me, things that talks about how do we gather and have ownership around our data and share that data in a systematic way with third parties and proprietary service providers. Well, there's an evolution that's happening right now. So one of the interesting things about the space that I sit is I see things a year before it goes on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. So MIT and Israeli startup right now are working on something called multi-party computation, which has to do with differential privacy. It's adding noise into the data so that you basically fully obfuscate and hide the personal information in that data set. So moreover, this data vault notion changes very fundamentally, because instead of, let's say, IBM or Twitter coming to me and saying, give me the data for this particular query, here's the way it's going to work. It's going to work in the form of, you ask a question, let's say, is this person old enough to come into the bar? Are they allowed to drink? I'm not going to pass their personal information. I'm just simply going to run that query inside my encrypted, locked down vault and give you back the result or the model. So the answer becomes yes, this person is allowed to come into the bar, but you have no idea who this person is. And that's where things are going. Moreover, on top of that, you have the decentralized, right, blockchain ledger project. So I love the fact that IBM has already contributed significant code to the Linux Hyperledger project, and that's critical because when you get into a decentralized environment, you have to get down to a trustless peer-to-peer messaging, fully distributed file sharing. And this is huge, and really there's no other way to lock it down, because as they will talk about, privacy and security is hugely difficult, at least the traditional way.
20 words or less, right? So I do think that security and privacy are incredibly complex, and like Scott said, they're both interrelated, but they're also incredibly different. Security and privacy both will need for us to be successful. It'll need to evolve, both aspects of it. It'll need to evolve from a society and cultural perspective in terms of our comfort level around sharing of data. It'll also need to evolve in terms of how we think about security. Right now, a lot of the security that's being applied in IoT is being done in these stovepipes. It's being done for very specific situations, very specific solutions. And we need to be thinking about this more holistically across the spread. And the reason for that is because at the end of the day, the devices themselves and the sources of the data are not what's relevant. What's relevant is the data itself, and how we start to correlate that data and how we start to leverage that data. And that's where it's really going to get interesting, to the point that we will start to see societal change happen. We'll start to see economic change happen. We'll start to see political change happen. And these are things that typically technologists are way removed from. But the reality is today, you need to think about the impact that you can actually have with IoT. And all of these are opportunities for all of us, regardless of where you are in the ecosystem of providing solutions within IoT.
Anybody else want to do a security privacy? Do one more?
Well, I'd say it's demographically driven. If you look at millennials, they don't care about security and privacy. They post everything about their lives on Facebook. Now, maybe that will change by the time they're our age, but I look at this group and we're kind of on the upper end of the demographic group here. So this continual focus, sorry, Chris, yeah, but this continual focus on privacy is really our age group asking this question. Not that it's not an important question, but the relevance of this might shift over time.
I'm only 16. So, industries. A lot of different industries here at the show, right? Banking, consumer manufacturing, automotive, aerospace, you name it, ... What's IoT going to do to those industries? And how are the industries going to transform themselves? Are the lines going to blur? What's going to happen to the supply chain? How are those industries going to work with themselves in new and different ways? What's the take on the industry transformation piece?
2 words: massive.
I've been bitten by IoT.
Massive failure.
Yeah.
Yes.
It needs battery.
No, it says the battery's good.
Yeah, it's there we go. Okay. So massive disruption. I think there will be disruption across all industries. We've seen what the simple application of smartphones with cars, with things like Uber. We're seeing disruption if you look at what the weather company's done with combining device data with logistics, air, insurance. Any industry that uses things, which is all industries, is going to face disruption. It's more of a matter of time. Will it be 10 years, 15? I think it depends on the industry, but they're all going to be disrupted. If you look at businesses like the Amazons of the world, where they're trying to more accurately ship and deliver. I live in Seattle. I can order things from Prime Now and have them delivered in an hour. So it's instant gratification from something that I ordered electronically online. If you look at what's happening with self-driving cars, are we there yet with self-driving cars? No, not yet. Will we get there? Yeah, the motivation's too high. Will it be self-driving passenger cars first? I don't know about that. I look at trucking and logistics, and if you look at ships already, big tanker ships and such, they're almost entirely automated already. Some of them are. All of these things are moving towards being able to track, let's say on that container ship, all of the contents of all of the containers on that ship, along with the ship, where it is, where it's been, when it was moved from port onto the ship, when it was taken off, all of that, all being handled electronically. Getting massive improvements in speed of production, delivery of items, lowering costs. All of those things are things that all businesses need. There's nobody going, gee, I really wish we could deliver these slower. That's what's coming. And we're finding new ways to deliver this. We're finding smarter ways. Think of taking the weather company data and altering a truck's route because you know that there's going to be tornadoes in the area where you were originally going to take. The truck alters its drive. You can't get that from, say, a map application today. But if you combine data from different places, you're able to make a smarter choice, and that truck gets there faster. Those are just simple examples. There are countless examples to how things are going to be disrupted, and it's coming reasonably soon. We'll see it in the next 10 to 20 years across the majority of industries.
Barriers are being broken, right? I mean, just think about this. 150 years ago, consider electricity and energy. What a silo, right? And then, enter Moore's law, driving the bus, and we have Google Nest, we have Tesla, Solar City. I mean, define an energy company for me in 5 years. So I think that there aren't those barriers anymore, and we are seeing this huge disruption. And I was just at Distributech. Was anybody there? It was absolutely mind-blowing and fascinating, which is funny to say about a utility conference, right? But if you're a science geek like me, I come from the science side, and now I have to mold myself in with technology, but I'm a science background. In the utility industry with smart cities, right? Smart meters, smart cities, smart cars. It is absolutely, positively mind-blowing. And all the rules that we knew of the past are gone. We're on a journey, and it's a hero's journey, and right now we are all blazing a trail currently.
Just to say, if you look at the market cap or value of Uber, the market cap of Uber is equal to all the taxi cabs in the world added together. So, yeah, thank you. So if you look at, so that has happened that quickly. Or if you look at Tesla's market cap, it's equal to half of GM's. Tesla sold 33,000 cars, GM sold 10 million. The market has told us how it's valuing disruption.
Just wanted to add something quick. So if you
Need me to hold the mic, Chris?
thank you. Thank you, Chris. So let's talk about real life examples. So in the case of traditional industries, whether we're talking about heavy industries or other industries, their focus today is around product. But the future of manufacturing and industries is product plus platform as a service. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's take the example of URS, which is an engineering civil construction firm. So what they do is they build bridges and civil infrastructure. That's what they do. But the future of URS with IoT has the potential to become something entirely different, where they could become that plus data analytics platform that serves up analytics as a service to government, public works, and cities. Why? Because those entities value monitoring and prevention of their infrastructure. I come from California where there is tremendous amount of earthquake. You want to know, after a particular earthquake, what type of structural damage that it has caused on your bridges, as an example. Being able to serve that data in terms of the friction points becomes valuable. So what that means is traditional industries like some of you will have an opportunity to monetize in ways that you didn't even have before. Moreover, one of the things that's going to be very important, and I'm so glad that IBM is leading the way here, is around the use of exogenous data. So another example is cancer research. Most of the cancer research centers hoard their own data, much like many of your firms. You hold on to your data like it's your life. But where real innovation comes in is when you're able to aggregate that data within and across industries. So imagine the cancer research, how much innovation we can have in breakthroughs if we were to actually combine that data set. So one of the things that I envision, and I know IBM is with me on this, is this notion of democratizing data. And I believe that there's going to be new business models that's going to be coming up, that's going to be learning to figure out how to share your firm-specific data in a way that protects your competitive advantage, but still allows for monetization as well. And as an economy, we're starting to unify the data set, because the real insight in terms of intrinsic and extrinsic value is when you take your firm data plus exogenous data.
So you guys bring on an ad lib from me. I listen to the answers that come across. And I want you guys to all think about disruption. And I want you to give me each a simple answer. Is it here now? Meaning, if you're in an industry, is disruption here today and you just don't see it if you're not doing it? Is it here in 3 years? Is it here in 5 years? I mean, where are you guys all truly? Because I heard a bunch of years called out. But when I listen to the answers, I think there's a suggested answer that comes out. So just real quickly, ask Mike, is disruption here now or is it coming?
I think it's coming. So I heard the reference to Uber twice. The future is it's shared economy minus Uber. You're probably thinking, what in the hell is that? But it's a true P2P shared economy where you're not bloating the capitalization of a private company, but rather the margins go to the individuals. And this is an area of research and technologies that we're building right now.
Airbnb has more rooms than any hotel chain in the world. Alibaba is the most valuable retailer, and it doesn't hold any inventory. There are so many examples of disruption. It's not just Tesla and Uber. So I disagree with my esteemed panelist. It's here now.
Now.
It's starting now.
You know, one of the challenges that we all face is connectivity, and we see that today in the microphone, right? Connectivity is not ubiquitous, but to answer the question directly, I'd say it's now. Whether you see it today or not, maybe a different conversation, but I think the reality is that every single industry that I've run across, and I've had the opportunity to work with a number of different industries, every single one has some aspect of disruption that is taking place right now. May not be across your industry, but in particular pockets at a minimum, it's happening right now.
So we'll do one more canned, and then we'll take some questions from the audience, and we'll pass you the mic. That works so well. Standards. I listen to things happening right now. The role of standards. How are standards shaping this? What work needs to be done?
So for those of you who travel a lot, do you guys carry power adapters? Yeah. Now imagine if you carried a suitcase, just a suitcase full of power adapters. Well, that is the current landscape of standards and operability. Now with that said, there are some highlights, which is the IIC, which IBM is part of, All-Student Alliance, and the newly formed Open Connectivity Foundation, which is the successor to OIC. So they're working on this fragmentation in the industry to have interoperability across manufacturers, across operating systems, across chipsets and transports. So it's happening. And that also addresses security as well. But it's still a bit of a challenge. But of course, the obvious benefits of interoperability is easy. Some of you have been hesitant to purchase connected home devices. Why? Aside from the setup, because are they going to talk to one another, right? So that's where the holy grail of interoperability becomes.
An open system will always beat a closed proprietary system over time. And that's why open source has dominated. You know, who has 1 million programmers working on it, right? No private company. Well, open standards do. And so ultimately everything will go to open. Now we're always going to have chaos with these standards wars, but the intelligence is so great with Watson that we will see systems that make systems work together. So I think it's an irrelevant question today because we now have the compute power to solve all those things, all those conflicts.
I think all of you are incredibly intelligent and you all have an answer to this question. And bottom line is we don't have IoT if we are not able to be connected. And if we don't have open standards, I think IoT just isn't going to be a powerful reality. So they must exist.
It's funny, we're all talking about open standards, yet we mentioned the automotive market before, and it doesn't have entirely open standards. I can't take a wiring harness from one car and plug it into another unless they're the exact same make and model. What I find are that closed systems are usually in the beginning faster to build, easier to adapt, and quicker to monetize. And then eventually it gets driven to an open standard based off the learnings of those closed systems that initially started out. So trying to start out with pure open systems across the board for everything is possible. You're just going to move at a snail's pace compared to if you had chosen to use closed systems initially and then evolve to open systems. So I see things evolving to open systems, but I don't see everything starting out as open.
I would agree with that. I think the point around standards that I would take is that standards will evolve over time. As we go through the maturity of the IoT process, depending on which strata you happen to play at, those standards will come out. Don't worry about them as you get started. Worry about innovation. Worry about the opportunities, the value that you're bringing to the table. Focus on that. As the maturity level of the solution starts to come together, and more importantly, we start to see integration of devices and integration of data elements, the standards will start to bubble up and start to make themselves available. And I think that's the point that it really gets interesting with not just the open standards, but even specific standards around certain particular industries and solutions.
So fantastic discussion. Thank you. So audience participation time. Who's got a question? Anybody?
So you talked about, I guess...
I've got to give you the mic. It doesn't work.
You had talked about shifts in business model or even creating new business models. I wanted to hear your thoughts on, I guess, the primary drivers, qualitative, quantitative, in implementing IoT into existing businesses and how that'll look in the future.
Who wants to take the discussion on today's businesses and qualitative drivers?
So I just want to start by framing the question, which is if you go to people on the street and say, innovation, talk to me about it, they'll think about a product or a service. They'll say the iPhone, right? But only 15% of the value comes from products and services. 75 to 90% of the value we're seeing being created in disruption is about new business models. So most companies are focused on their product or service, but the real value is changing how we operate, changing how we interact with our supply chain, changing how we interact with our customer. And that's where there's an innovation deficiency.
I absolutely echo what I heard just there as well. One of the things that I think IBM has done a really nice job is this notion of network effect. So if you're familiar with the paradigm, and there's been a talk by MIT professor on this topic, is a network ecosystem. So you look at the valuation of Uber, and there was an analyst that actually did the computation on a spreadsheet and shared it publicly. And it came very short of what their current valuation was. And then one of the investors of Uber came in and said, you're missing something, which is a network effect. In other words, to answer your question specifically, as a firm, you focus on the core competency. You focus on the key capabilities that you do better than anybody else. You expose that in the form of API services so that you allow the innovation to happen within the developer community, supply chain, 5 porters, right? So what happens when you do that is you take the upside, but you don't take the downside, because the innovation and the fail is happening with everybody else. But when it succeeds, you get a part of that network. That's why Apple is successful. That's why Google is successful. If Google or Samsung or anybody exposes their API services, it's for one reason and one reason alone: the network effect.
Brilliant. Want to do another question? Go ahead.
This is just my excuse to be able to finally say this, but I think the data scientist is the sexiest person in the C-suite. And the ability actually to take data, right? We have all of this data now. We have dark data. The ability to take that data and make something very meaningful at that human level, to me, I think is where it's at. Because what we need to be successful in companies is to create a user experience, right? That's what people want. They want an experience. And how do we know what kind of an experience they want with our product or service? Well, we get that information from data, don't we? So I think the exquisite amalgamation of a data scientist with someone who also understands that human component, that marketing edge, has got to be the winning number.
He's got a question. Brian's got a question.
We're going to go to another question.
Yeah, I got a question.
Brian, go ahead.
Stand away from it. So we were talking about security and privacy. I think right now it's probably all the buzz with Apple and what's going on in that situation. We haven't heard the word transparency very much. From a transparent standpoint of Internet of Things and what the data is being used for, how the brands and the different devices are actually taking that data and then either personalizing the experience, which is what Tamara was talking about, or ultimately creating a better experience for the user. What role does educating the brands on the importance of transparency of the data so that they don't end up happening to open up backdoors and such things?
Transparency of data.
So, transparency of data, in my view, I don't really, this is my personal view here, I really don't want companies to have data about me. Even if it's to my advantage, I would rather control the data about me and choose which companies have access to that data. I can't live in that world, but that's what I would like. Instead, companies collect data about us and have for an incredibly long time. If you have a credit score, by the way, companies have been collecting data about you to achieve the calculation of that credit score. You don't have direct control over that. You also don't have direct control over any of the other avenues of these companies collecting data about you. So the only thing you can do is hope that they will protect that data and that you don't end up having all of your data become freely available to hackers or other people that you have absolutely no trust and can exploit that data. There's transparency of data, but it needs to be in a way that that's not going to put at risk the people whose data it is, but will allow them to take advantages of all the things they want, profile data or session data or whatever it happens to be. There's a risk, though, in governments and other systems exploiting all of that data from all of those companies to take advantage of people. And I think that's where the real risk is, and I think that's where, referencing Apple, I think Apple's doing the right thing. I don't think that for one specific phone that we should create a backdoor so that anyone that can figure out how to access that backdoor can get in, including hackers, other governments, all of these people that you don't want to have access to your data, whatever your data happens to be.
I would kind of go along the same lines, but I'd actually take the opposite approach, which is if my data is going to benefit the greater good, I'm more than happy to make it available. You're right. I do have a choice. I want the choice to be able to make it available. But there's another component there that has to be layered into this that affects all of us, right? Each of you that are developing solutions or working with solutions, you are custodians of data. And so as part of that, as custodians of data, we have to think about that data, and that data has a personality. That data has a life. That data belongs or describes someone or something. And as we start to think about, as Tamara mentioned, the personal experience, and the catchphrase that I've kind of caught on to is this market of one, right? Personalization has become the market of one. And so as we start to really understand the uniqueness of what individuals want, what each of us want, but yet are able to share data in a way that's meaningful, there's a real responsibility that corporations and individuals that are developing solutions have to take with regards to how they hold, protect, and value data. And that's something that culturally doesn't exist broadly today, but must start to change. So back to your question, Brian, is that the corporations and the brands need to think about data as more than just bits on a page or bits in a database. They have to think about it in terms of what that data actually describes and what's the right thing to do with that data, and what if that data were about me? So if I'm developing a solution, if I'm marketing to someone, what if that's me? And so you start to put a personal spin on this, it starts to cause people to think differently. It's not the impersonalization of, oh, well, this is just my company's data or just some bits in an Excel spreadsheet or a database somewhere. So I think we have to think about data, custodian of data, how we protect data, much differently than before. And I'm out.
Very good. We're gonna give one comment because you're dying for it.
200,000 Americans die every year because of contraindications of medicine. That's a failure of data sharing. These are very easily prevented, and 1 million people are made very sick. 200,000 die. So just while we're concerned about privacy and so on, there's a huge upside to the sharing of data too. And the way we advertise to ourselves right now is spamming. When you really understand a one-to-one marketing, I see each ad I'm very thankful for each ad because I need the product right now and they're advertising to me.
So one last thought. Here we go.
Okay. So I throw a lot of buzzwords at you guys, but one of the ones that's going to be really important that you may not have heard is called the personal empowerment economy. And so if you'd like to speak about that topic, please come and see me. But it's going to revolutionize everything from advertising and marketing.
So I want to thank our panelists. Let's give a big round of applause. Yay. And this concludes today's panel, and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.